Hi there. In this video, I'm going to discuss the reaction to the revelation in the House of the Dragon premiere episode that Aegon the Conqueror had a prophetic dream that the White Walkers would return. And this is the secret motivation behind the Targaryen conquest. That it really happened because the Targaryens were trying to unite and protect the Seven Kingdoms against the greater existential threat to all of humanity. That the Targaryens were here to save Westeros, and this was a great commission passed down from father to son, king to king. Now, you'll notice I didn't immediately rush to report on this because I reported on it as a big leak months ago. That this came out from reliable sources. I did a whole report on it, how I, as a book fan, actually think this is a good idea. I talked about this in my episode review a few days ago. So I'm on board with this. And generally, I've seen most book fans positive towards it, as much as most of us are ever for any one thing. But that in the interviews, Condell is saying, Martin told me this. I didn't invent it. That Martin himself has, trying to avoid spoilers, but pretty much acknowledged, like in that Vanity Fair interview, yes, this is something I told them. This isn't made up whole cloth just to tie the show in. And, book fans who are more willing to go through all the little details going, well, it always felt like Rhaegar, Jon's father, Daenerys' brother, he was motivated by some prophecy he read in an ancient scroll in the Red Keep Library or something. Maybe he rediscovered Aegon the Conqueror's specific prophecy, that he calls it the Song of Ice and Fire, that maybe this is where that originates. And the way Martin described it in the interview, that they say, oh, he just mentioned it in passing, as if this was something that's just part of the mythos, not even something he was introducing. That there's other little hints and pieces there. That I talked about this before. In short, we know Martin started that infamous clip where when Fire and Blood was coming out 4 years ago, he said maybe Aegon got a hint that the White Walkers were coming, and we all exploded at that. That he's known it at least since Fire and Blood came out, but Fire and Blood started out as novellas which were originally sidebars for the World of Ice and Fire source book in 2014. So he's writing this, think 2012-ish, after the fifth book was published, right? I honestly think Martin has known this for about a decade, around 2012 when he was writing the World Book stuff, because that's when he was writing the Fire and Blood sections on Aegon the Conqueror are basically the same thing you see in the World Book. And on top of that, a different quote that's been going around from the World Book. This is from the Reach chapter, the Old Town subsection, that and they were maesters visiting Valyria before it fell, and this is like a non sequitur. You can tell he's seeding something, because it doesn't fit naturally into the quote. Quote, Septon Barth's claim that the Valyrians came to Westeros because their priests prophesied that the doom of man would come out of the land beyond the narrow sea can safely be dismissed as nonsense, as can many of Barth's queerer beliefs and suppositions, which, as we know, usually turn out to be right. So there's little hints of this from the World Book, from the writing period around 2012. I think Martin already knew about this. Real question is, did he know about it since, like, the first novel? Was this always a secret he was sitting on? Very possibly. With all the Rhaegar stuff, and when Daenerys has visions of him, the Song of Ice and Fire and everything, and little hints Tyrion gives in the fifth book of, why didn't the Valyrians try to invade Westeros when, with a fraction of their strength, Aegon with only 3 dragons managed to conquer them? At the height of their power with 300 dragons, why did they just stop at Dragonstone? They could have invaded here if they wanted to. So he points that out. But the point is, generally, I'm not seeing a backlash from book readers. There's always some hesitance, but like the major site leaders like Westeros.org in their video review said they were generally positive to this. I mean, they were making, they're nitpicking of, people are going to make so much of this, but then in their video review they acknowledge, well, there's Rhaegar and the prophecy, and Martin said this, that they're not upset about this. They're generally on board with it. They were just worried about the reaction to it. The real backlash I've seen is from TV-only viewers, which there's really 2 groups. There's the hardcore hype fans who are actually running TV-only news channels. And then there's just, a general TV audience of just regular people. who you don't expect to put that much thought into researching, oh, Martin actually said this was his idea. They barely go online at all. That I have offline friends who said, well, I was a little confused. Why are they setting up the White Walker thing again when that just fizzled out in season 8, which is a normal reaction, I guess. And the TV fanatics, like the Watchers on the Wall crowd, I don't want to get into too many specifics with that, they were kind of pouting about it and sullen of, why are they setting that up again? Because it fizzled out, and apparently the real story was Daenerys going crazy or something. Like, my instant reaction, and the instant reaction of a lot of other major news channels, like David Lightbringer, for example, was, oh, cool, they're prominently emphasizing the White Walker prophecy because that wasn't the real ending in season 8. Because that actually is an important storyline, which they dropped like a stone. But our reaction is immediately, well, season 8 wasn't the real ending. It's so weird that even for, like, I've seen casual viewers going, but the end, it's so weird when you go, that was a bad adaptation. Like, an example I use is X-Men movies. Wow, that was a terrible X-Men 3. I'm like, that's a bad adaptation. They might reboot it eventually or something, or with DC Comics stuff, of course. That was a weird take on it. That wasn't the real story, but it's weird with the casuals. I'm seeing them going, but season 8 was real, and we're like, maybe it isn't, and it blows their minds. And then there's people who admit season 8 was poorly written, but think it's the only season they're ever going to get. It's weird, on a meta level, they stand back and go, I don't think this was the real ending of the books, but from the TV canon, why are they setting it up for season 8? I'm like, dude, I expect there to be a remake in the next 10 to 20 years. After successful prequel eras. I mean, far down the line, not soon, but they're not setting up season 8. They're setting up the eventual remake, is my answer to that. And it seems so obvious to me and to other channels that David Lightbringer did a 2-hour, it was probably one of his best live streams he's done, going over this in great detail. I'm doing a shorter, more focused version of that. You see, I'll link his thing below. Of just, he's like, it's so weird that things that are obvious to some people aren't to others. Of, well, because that wasn't the ending. Because they're going to make a different one. They're not setting it up. It's comparable to X-Men First Class going, why is X-Men First Class making nods to Jean Grey or whatever to set up the bad ending in X-Men 3? Well, because then came Days of Future Past, which reset everything. So in terms of, it's weird. Now, I understand a generalized backlash by a general audience of, oh, the White Walker thing was so silly. Why are they emphasizing this again? And that they don't think the next 2 steps of, well, maybe they're going to do a remake eventually. What gets me are the hype fans who actually are going online and allegedly discussing this, but they don't have much to discuss. And even that is split into 2 groups. There's the very small fanatic group who you've seen because they race around trying to get people to agree with them, who say season 8 was amazing. They are there. They are harassing everyone who has content creators who have actual channels. They go around yelling at us. And this isn't like Watchers on the Wall. This is like the fringe people who insist, no, this was the perfect subversion. It was really about Daenerys being evil. The White Walkers were never a major storyline. The prince that was promised doesn't matter. On the one hand, while that is insane, there's a certain internal consistency to it, that if you believe in it, you make essays defending it, no matter how ridiculous. What really gets me here, like the Watchers on the Wall crowd, who just reading through their reaction to all this, it was tepid. It was, I can't get fired up about this because I hated season 8. And that's the weird thing with them. They refuse to admit that Benioff, and people like that, refuse to admit that Benioff and Weiss were bad, that they betrayed the books, that this wasn't the real story. It never even occurs that they don't want to admit this wasn't the real story. But they can't bring themselves to defend season 8. So what they do is, for lack of a better term, pouting. And it's so weird when I see this, and you've seen it too, that they will just basically mutter in short bursts, and text-based, but still, no, the show is good. No, the White Walkers are stupid. Care to elaborate on that? That they don't have a coherent counter-philosophy. Even the fanatics who say it was perfect have a counter philosophy which is, doesn't have much basis in reality, but it's the ones who are just, why do you think they've been so inactive for 3 years since the show ended? There was nothing to discuss, because discussing it for 5 minutes would reveal they were wrong to support Benioff and Weiss. That for 4 years you gaslighted us about, no, the Sansa rate makes sense. The changes to Dorne and Stannis and Sansa and all this, these are, well, that's the argument they made. These are side stories that they're cutting out or condensing to focus on the main story of the White Walkers. That is the thing they hammered us with. No, it was Sansa and Stannis were necessary sacrifices for the White Walker story with Dany and Jon. We're going to make up stories about time-traveling Bran being the Night King, when there is no Night King in the books. Then when in one episode, the White Walker thing is gone, and the prince that was promised is meaningless because they have Arya doing it. What do they have to say for themselves? That nothing was sacred to Benioff and Weiss. They weren't sacrificing the Sansa story as a measured decision to make room for the White Walker story. They were cutting everything because they wanted to leave to make movies. And suddenly no one has anything to say. That all of the lies and excuses upon excuses and mental gymnastics about, no, they're cutting Sansa to focus on the real story. And it's so weird seeing their reactions to that after the first episode, that, why are they doing this? We all know that this is going to end with season 8, and it either doesn't occur to them or they don't want to admit that this is this giant implication that season 8 is not the real ending, and they're doing a soft reboot or something. Now, shout out to History of Westeros podcast, by the way, who just did an amazing second interview with George R. R. Martin himself, this time a video. They posted this up 2 days ago. And I'm going to link that as well, in which he was generally talking about the issue of TV canon versus book canon. And he said, well, given that all the other spin-offs are prequels, it kind of thankfully sidesteps that question of, do we need to reboot season 8 or not? For a long time, we don't even need to address that question directly, because, House of the Dragon's a prequel. Though I like what he said, that what I'm hoping for, he said there's always going to be a difference between a TV and book continuity due to adaptation things, that there are already differences between House of the Dragon and the books from the first episode, like Rhaenys is the candidate at the Great Council, but I consider that a good condensation, because it was for her bloodlines. That isn't, but it's still different, even though I don't consider, it's in the spirit of the book, if not the letter of the book. He said there's always going to be a difference between a book and a TV continuity. It's a question of how drastic is that difference. And he said, what we're hoping for is that with the multiple prequels they're working on, multiple spin-offs, I hope we don't have 17 different canons that, like, the Young Corliss show and the Nymeria show and the House of the Dragon and Duncanhage don't all contradict each other, but moving forward, they're all relatively in continuity with each other. And we are sidestepping the question of how much Benioff and Weiss's Game of Thrones affected things. And then he pointed out, except, of course, with the pitched Jon Snow sequel by Kit Harington, I don't know what's going to happen with that. But other than that, like with House of the Dragon, at least it sidesteps it. We don't need to confront that head on. But we don't need 17 canons. We want, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the phrase they're batting around the office for this is the World of Westeros Cinematic Universe, because Westeros is a continent in the bigger world, which is just the world. And for that cinematic universe, they're planning out phases like Marvel. We must respect the phases. And just as they have Kevin Feige, they need to planning everything out for Marvel. They need to plan this out. And like DC Comics, just yesterday they hired that David Lin executive to oversee, we're going to have phases the way Marvel does, because you need to plan this to make one Marvel Cinematic Universe canon, DC Expanded Universe canon, or the World of Westeros prequel verse canon that Duncanhage and House of the Dragon are consistent with each other. It helps that they're different time periods and not overlapping, of course, but just pointing out, the Jon Snow thing is a whole other issue, but we're trying not to have 17 canons. We're trying to have one canon for those, at least, for the TV show canon separate from book canon. So check out their thing below, but I'm 15 minutes, I want to wrap this up. Just that David Lightbringer really pointed out in the 2-hour thing, dude, our instant reaction was that they're going to reboot this. That, no, that was not the real ending. And all I'm seeing from the other TV channels is pouting of, why are they doing this? That was stupid. When you expect these to be the people actually analyzing that. When they're the same people who just mutter, I didn't like season 8, but I don't want to talk about it. And I have more respect for the hyper fanatics who are like harassing us online, everyone, because they need people to agree with them, going, this betrays the ending that was the perfect ending. Well, okay, that has an internal logic to it, that you thought that was the perfect ending, and this is contradicting that, fair enough. It's that whole, they don't want the TV hype people who are really leading everything in the later seasons, when they abandoned the books, went, no, we don't need the books, we don't need any of that, and there isn't going to be an ongoing Benioff and Westeros. This is not their show. When Watchers on the Wall went dark for half a year after filming ended for House of the Dragon, they said, well, we have nothing else. They're going through the motions. You can tell they're not enthusiastic. You can tell they had 3 years convincing themselves that Targaryens are the villains and were not fired up by a Targaryen show. They wanted the Long Night crap, which the disasters we're hearing about that they are not enthusiastic about this. They're going to wither on the vine. It does bother me that general audiences are like, why are they hyping this again? But I think their confusion or disinterest is less deep-seated. That once they come around to the idea of, oh, this is a soft reboot, it'll be fine. Another shout-out last minute to a reporter from winteriscoming.net, she's a freelancer, so she actually reports in multiple things. Federica Baccio, I don't know if you've heard of her. I've reported on some of her stuff before. She's really great. And like David Lightbringer, she has been in multiple news sources posting articles going, maybe this wasn't the real ending. Maybe there was never so much emphasis on women in the show before because there weren't female writers before and they let the characters down. Really willing to criticize Season 8. So she's great. She's been on board with, yeah, this is reversing what Season 8 did. Season 8 was not the real ending for these characters or storylines. I'm going to link to her Twitter because she reports in multiple things and she posts when she freelances different essays to different people. Mostly she does winteriscoming.net, the new winteriscoming.net, which is also pretty decent. So her, David Lightbringer, and the History of Westeros thing with Martin just talking about canon and stuff, it is so weird that I am not seeing a giant backlash to this, that if anything, the hardcore book people are, oh, this is a return to the book thing, and forcing people to address, wow, throwing out the White Walker thing, which everyone was traumatized by, we need to address that wasn't the real ending, because I think at the time, as a book fan, I'd already given up on it. It's so weird that people were so in shock that they didn't even question this isn't the real story. They abandoned it. Because you'd have to be a crazy person to make a story like this and think it was better than what the author told you. And that's what annoys me. It used to be that they're gaslighting us that this is amazing. Now they're saying, it's terrible. Let's blame the franchise. Let's blame Martin in the book. So they're not even asking, was that the real ending? And again, I thought this would happen like 2 years from now. Right before Season 1 dropped, the first episode, I said, seeing all the general reactions to the season trailer, to the full trailer coming out of Comic-Con month before the premiere, I realized I was getting hopeful about our timeline because the hardcore center group of like book readers and attentive TV fans, it's not TV versus book, it's attentive fans versus hype fans, who are in my comments section following, the regulars, I'd managed to turn around to give House of the Dragon a shot. But it was weird, just a revelation when I saw the trailers reactions. It went, people are, and they're saying word for word, it's not just me inferring this, they said, I haven't even written the word Daenerys in text for 3 years. Mainstream reviewers saying, I almost cried. I got triggered when the word Daenerys appeared on screen in the title card for House of the Dragon Episode 1, that they are genuinely traumatized to the point of inaction, to the point they didn't even start investigative reporting on, was this the real ending, or did you change it because you're concerned with your own career and wanted to leave for movies? And I am really upset that you are reporters. This isn't just audiences, it's people who are running news channels like on YouTube and for mainstream media things going, I was too traumatized to report on it. Okay, you do not get that luxury. You're supposed to act like a reporter. And I thought at first, like 2 years ago, I thought generally the way we work our way back up to a remake, or at least addressing, even if there is no remake, wow, that wasn't the real ending, is just having a quality prequel. It could be in any era. It could be Duncan Egg. It could be anything, to make this a healthy franchise. And then when there's enough people back talking about it, go, the first show wasn't very good. This directly addresses a plot point from the original show. The White Walker story was dropped like a stone after almost a decade of build-up. After 8 years of build-up, they dropped it. It was the first scene, 2011, and 2019, 8 years later, they just dropped it as, one episode, it's nothing. And all the build-up, all the hints, all the R plus L equals J stuff, that they would bring it back this prominently. And you saw me make the leak report months ago. I knew they'd bring up all the White Walkers might come back. Calling it outright the Song of Ice and Fire. Wow, that was cool. That I'm surprised how much this is bringing it up again, directly bringing up what the hell was Season 8? Was that the real ending? So I still think we will not even be at a point where we're actively researching Season 8 stuff. I said I eventually want to go back over what they did behind the scenes, just that it was an incompetent TV production, like they had no idea how logistics work and stuff. Let me reiterate, we're not really going to do that for another 2 years. Not until after Season 2 of this show airs. Possibly that same year we'll have Winds of Winter in 2 years from now. Martin's said he's making very good progress on it. We think he's about 2/3 done, of which he got like a third done the past 2 years during the pandemic. But yeah, laugh as you must. But I think there's a chance we might get Winds of Winter 2 years from now at the earliest, which is around when Season 2 will come out, like late 2024. That is when we start officially going, that probably wasn't the real ending. But I'm surprised at the good numbers, the good buzz level we're getting for these early rumblings. What you're seeing now are early rumblings, which I'm pleasantly surprised to see how much of this there is, that it's already sparking discussion about why are they emphasizing the White Walker prophecy so much? Some people just dismissing it, but others, if even a few people are starting to question, well, maybe that wasn't the real ending, it'll be worth it, because it's more than we had a year ago. So please check out the 3 links I gave before. The History of Westeros. Federica's done a lot of nice articles. And the 2-hour thing that David Lightbringer did on the same thing. He's a lot more eloquent than this. I just dashed this off. But this is my shorter 20-minute thing to his 2-hour thing. That, it's so weird seeing people who, it's not that they disagree with us. They refuse to even acknowledge the possibility this is raising, that wasn't the real ending. That they're not debating with us, oh, you think wasn't the real ending, we think you're wrong. When they're writing about it, they're pouting. They're not considering the implications. They just dismiss, oh, well, that didn't lead to anything in Season 8. Well, they're going to talk about it a lot more in the second episode, which is tomorrow. So I'll make better formatted, better presented videos about the specifics they go over in that. When we see in the preview Rhaenyra reading the dagger, and it says, and his will be the Song of Ice and Fire. So I'll cover what Season 2 does when we get it tomorrow. Please like and subscribe. We're going to keep covering this.